Hey, everybody. Welcome you back to another episode of the Gonzaga Nation podcast. Christian Pedersen, joined by Dan Dickau. Dan, we continue our off-season. I won't even call this one a trudge. The last couple off seasons, it's been portal, realignment. This season, like, we've actually had just a nice little adventure every week, something fun and new to talk about. We want to get to Mark Few stuff later on this episode because your episode with Coach Few in studio came out, and I even have follow-up questions because there was just so much you guys discussed about that. But before that, I want to talk about Stu Jackson, who, like, he's not our boss, but he's sort of our fearless lead. He's like he's like a cruise ship captain. You don't see him, you don't really know him, but he's generally guiding where all of us are headed. He's the head of the WCC, and some interesting stuff came out. We had an article by Cole Forsman talking about how he is on, I want to get this right here, it's the NCAA men's basketball committee, which sounds vague. And so I hope that you can fill us in on that. But Stu's involvement in that brought up some other subsequent questions about how much representation the non-Power 5 schools are getting in committee meetings like this, in schools being inherently selected to be preseason. Like, it just seems like this is a good entryway to talk about, is the WCC and other non-Power 5 schools getting their fair shake? So help us explain and understand what this committee that he's on is, what his impact is, and just kind of the stuff that you wanted to talk about that stemmed from all that.
Yeah, well, it's essentially he's on the committee that selects the field for the NCAA tournament, i.e., at-large bids, helps with seeding, where the teams are going. So he'll be on that. He's actually replacing another WCC athletic director who was on it most recently, and that would be Renee Baumgartner at Santa Clara. She's recently retired or has announced her retirement. I don't know if it's gone into effect just yet, but so she's stepping down from that, and Stu Jackson is taking her spot on the selection committee. I think it's great in the fact that the WCC keeps representation and an advocate in the room as that process works itself out towards the end of the year. Because as we're all very well aware of, the power conferences are trying to swallow up as many bids as they can. I mean, you've seen comments from different commissioners in power leagues, from different athletic directors in different leagues, essentially saying it should only be power conference teams. We need to do away with our at-large bids for low major, and even to a certain extent, many of these mid-major conferences. And I completely disagree with that. That's something that makes the NCAA tournament what it is, and as exciting as it is, in particular that, conference week when you see teams that have laid it on the line throughout the season, and now they're basically playing a do or die game, some of them day after day in their conference tournament, just to make it to the NCAA tournament as a 14, 15, 16 seed that they're going to go up against a power team and more than likely get smacked. Yeah, there's been a couple 1 seeds that have been knocked off by those 16s. A couple 15s have knocked off 2s. But essentially, if these power conference commissioners and or some of these ADs get their way, you're going to lose a ton of interest in regards to the NCAA tournament, I think, from the average fan that wants to see the upset, that's drawn to the uniqueness, in particular, that first weekend. Because at the end of the day, these power conference teams that would be limping in with, say, a 500 record with maybe 1 or 2 marquee wins on their resume throughout the whole year, when maybe that opponent had an injury or were in a struggle spot during the season. If you're allowing these teams that have struggled to get in with those 500 records, as mentioned, they're not going to get to the Sweet 16. They're not going to get to the Elite Eight. They're not going to get to the Final Four. Now, someone might have some pushback and say, well, what about North Carolina State last year? Well, great. What about them? Yeah, they made a tremendous run. But if you look at it, a lot of that's due to the fact that they got hot at the right time of year and played spectacular in the ACC tournament. So, I really like the fact that with Baumgartner leaving the committee, Stu Jackson stepping into that role, and he can be a big time advocate for the WCC and hopefully many of the teams in comparable leagues. I mean, the WCC has been anywhere from, I want to say, the 7th ranked conference to the 12th ranked conference per KenPom over the last 10, 12 years. And they've shown it as a league that they can win games in the NCAA tournament. St. Mary's has done it, other than Gonzaga. And so I think this is a good move for Stu Jackson to join, and I think it should help the WCC at least continue to have a strong advocate in the room.
I want to. I don't want to agree with you. I do agree with you, but I also, my extrapolation of all this is if what you were saying happens as the hypothetical of Power Five heavy, just a lot, all of the, give a 500, seventh down team in the ACC the bid over someone in the WCC. That hurts. Like, yeah, I get what you're saying about the tournament, but to me, that hurts the whole season. If you show up to day one of the WCC season and it is a foregone conclusion that the only slot to the tournament is going to Gonzaga, what's the point of playing the season? Like, what is of getting hot, of playing road games, of trying to, like, it says to USF, Santa Clara, Pepperdine, don't worry about the portal, don't worry about recruiting, don't worry about any of this, because you're not going to make it. You can have a great NIT season. Congratulations. Now buzz on. Like, the thrill of the last couple of years has not been maybe necessarily Gonzaga in a dogfight for, are they going to win the WCC and make it out? Like, Gonzaga's good. But the rest of the conference, it has been fun for us to sit here and be like, oh, whoa, is this going to be a 2-team year? Is this going to be a 3-team year? There's a lot riding on this weekend's game between USF and Santa Clara, because second team there gets this. Like, there are so many of those permutations of week to week intrigue and upkeep during the regular season that to me just go away. The second that you say, like you're saying, Power 5, TV rankings, like whatever the buzzwords are that people are using to validate that excuse of, like, we're going to pick those teams. So I hope that Stu maintains, if not ups, the advocacy for it. And I'm not saying like seeds 11 through 16 should just all be handed out to NEAC, WCC, and all that. But like, the Mountain West last year had what, 6 teams or something like that? Like, yeah. Sometimes some of these conferences can have a really good year. So what's to say that in a year or two from now, the WCC couldn't have a Gonzaga, Santa Clara, Pepperdine, USFC? All right, I'm just filling in random school. Like, what's to say that it couldn't be 3 or 4 schools that all make it to the round of 32, Sweet 16 elite? Like, that, to me, that is the point of college basketball. I get what you were saying about the TV ratings and the inherent value and the Cinderellas versus the 12 through 16s getting smacked. But to me, it's all about the chase and leading up to it as much as it is about the actual tournament.
Yeah, I mean, you got some good solid points there. One of the unfortunate things in kind of talking this through as well and hearing a couple of your points is the NIT has already started to take away some of their automatic qualifiers for the lower conferences. So, for example, you take a team that, maybe out of the Southland or Big Sky here on the West Coast or the Big West or the Patriot League. There's so much to be said for winning your regular season league title, that you deserve recognition for that. You deserve a reward. And in years past, if you were to win your regular season conference title, but then you don't win your conference tournament, you could at least fall back and know that you're going to the NIT. With that going away a little bit, because the NIT has kind of said they want power conference teams, and a lot of that, I don't remember which conference commissioner said, let's make the NIT power conference only teams. That really hamstrings these leagues and these programs in the lower levels a lot more. And it's going to continue to make players in the portal go into the portal simply for the fact that they're going to say, I want to play in the NCAA tournament, or at least I want a postseason experience. So I think there's a lot of directions that we can go with what you were kind of leading into, you did touch on the Mountain West. I mean, last year they had 6 teams in. They had a phenomenal year, but they caught lightning in a bottle. They didn't necessarily prove it in the NCAA tournament. So what happens, in the eyes of those power conference league commissioners and the power conference ADs, they're going to say, oh, well, we gave you 6 last year. You only win, I think, 2 in the first round. That shows you're not as good. It's an athletic competition. I mean, obviously, unless a team is clearly outmatched, many times it's just a flip of the coin, and let's see who's playing well that day. A lot of interesting things are still being discussed behind the scenes that really we don't know about, for right or wrong, for good or bad. And my hope as a college basketball analyst is that they don't forget about the little guy. They don't forget about the mid-major guy. They don't just focus on the positives of TV revenue and ratings and money for the power schools, because unfortunately that seems to be a lot of what it's trending towards. And I know you wanted to get into some other things, but when you looked at you mentioned Cole Forsman, right? He shared with me an article today on ESPN. It's actually the latest bracketology. It's crazy to think that with the portal having still over 1,300 guys in it, not finding a home, players are still searching where they're going to be, that you could actually put together a bracketology for next March. What are we, 9.5, 10 months away from Selection Sunday? But ESPN and Lenardi does it. And the crazy thing about it is, if you were to look through it, there is only one mid-major team that is in the NCAA tournament as a non-automatic qualifier, so as an at-large bid. And guess who it is? St. Mary's out of the WCC. But guess what? They're also in the let me pull it up real quick, because they're in the last 4 in. So they would be playing in the play-in game essentially in Dayton. So they barely squeak in. So
Yeah,
you're talking about
being in the last 4 in, 9 months out, you might as well not be in. Like, that's such a
yeah,
great.
for sure. I mean, and I know it's a lot of projections and it's fun to look out that far, but it's so hard to project because rosters aren't even, finalized right now, for a lot of college teams. But you think about it, the Mountain West, who had 6 last year, you go through that ESPN.com article, there's only one, and that's Boise State, who's deemed the automatic qualifier because Lenardi's saying they're the best team in the league. They're going to win the league and tournament in the regular season title. So he slots them in. Not a single other Mountain West team is slotted as a at-large bid. The only other league that's similar in comparability to the Mountain West and or the WCC that has anybody in consideration is the Atlantic 10. They have VCU, and they also have St. Louis as first 4 out, next 4 out. I mean, so essentially these power conference teams and leagues are starting to get what they want, in that it's going to be just big time schools that are in it. And I really don't like it. I think I understand they're trying to shift and prioritize and keep as much of the money in their pockets as possible. But there's got to be some type of pushback in the fact that Stu Jackson's on the selection committee. Maybe he can be a strong advocate for that.
Every now and then we take massive detours and talk very minimal about Gonzaga. So I apologize in advance to the audience for this episode meandering off on somewhat of a side path. But in talking about all this, I think back to our conversation that we had about scholarships and how you just blew my mind that, like, NIL has flipped scholarships around and put them sort of on the back burner as like an extra tool that you can use and not the carrot to incentivize the kid to come. Does something need to happen with just the concept of the tournament? And I'm not saying like just straight up nuke it and let's start all over, but we talk about the NIT. At one point, way back in college basketball history, the NIT was the tournament. And the NCAA tournament was a little bit of the somewhat outlier. Then it sort of drew even. And then we've, over the last 25 years drifted, and not even drifted. It's the NCAA tournament has skyrocketed up to become a TV money making, like, national holiday type machine. And the NIT is a tournament now where teams are declining to go, even though they get bids. So I'm curious, do we need to say almost kind of the way that they do the preseason tournaments now, that there's the Battle for Atlantis, the Maui Invitational? Should we just say, okay, great, NCAA tournament, we love you. You're a little bit of an elitist jerk and a little bit of a snob, but okay, you're the traditional one. Everything else, just do tournaments of 10 to 12 teams and regionally invite or categorically invite or something like that, where it's, it's the Nike postseason tournament, it's the Reebok postseason tournament, it's the what, like, I almost think that that would be fun because you can do 2 weekends of Mondays. One weekend is the first 2 rounds of the Nike Elite 12, and then the next weekend is the championship one. And you have the NCAA champions and all the traditional blue bloods, but then you have like 3 or 4 or whatever it is, X number of smaller dotted regional sub champions, where it doesn't really rank them or any way, shape, and form, but it gives that team a chance to make a little postseason money, chance to keep playing, a chance to, pat yourselves on the back for hey, look, we won a tournament type of thing. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, that's something that is definitely probably been thrown out there by somebody. You know, and I think, I mean, really essentially what you're touching on is all these MTEs that are typically in that first 4 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and I'm saying play that as the post. I'm saying do that same thing again. It's like get rid of the whole field of the NIT and do that. Do 4 of those.
It very well could become that because I don't remember where I saw this article, and somebody had proposed scrapping the NIT for something similar to what you're mentioning and making it a true NIL bonus type of event where I don't think it was winner take all, but if you win and you advance, you make more kind of deal. So I know it's been thrown out there. How it would work, I don't know. And the fact that players are going to be now getting paid, like for example, you take a couple teams last year who said no to the NIT. And a lot of it was because coaches thought that their players were going to already enter their name in the portal and they wouldn't have a team to play for. Well, if we're starting to pay players, you could start to find players, right? I don't, I mean,
I hadn't thought
like,
about it.
hey, I don't want to play in that tournament. I'm going in the transfer portal early. Well, what is the true date that you can go in the transfer portal? I think what you're going to see is you're going to start seeing some legitimate contracts having to be written up, having to be enforced because I mean, there's so much of this gray area that really nobody has the answer to. The fact that I see players who, as a former player, a competitor myself, it ticks me off was like somebody would say, no, I don't want to play. Well, you've already been essentially like, say you're a professional, which these kids are now. You've agreed to play X amount of games in your season, and usually your season doesn't end until you finish on a loss. There's only one team each year that ends on a win in the NCAA tournaments. Been UConn the last 2 years. I don't even know who it was in the NIT. I don't even know who was in the CIT, CBI, and all that stuff. But there was somebody in those. So if your team is in a tournament, you have to play all the way through to get the money. If you don't, you're going to get fined. If in the NBA a player decided to just skip out on practice, skip out on the game, guess what? Here's a fine slip. You look at your next payroll deposit with your pay stub, and you look down the line items, and not just FICA and Social Security and all these other taxes that are taken out. Your fines are taken out, just like it was if you were to get a technical foul or a fine from the league. It's taken out. Curious how that's going to start coming into play because I guarantee you there's going to be scenarios where this will come up. If it didn't this year, it very may well come up next year.
As you talk through that, my brain pops in. Nike can come up with $500,000 as a winner's purse for 12. Take the best 12 teams that don't make the NCAA tournament. Like you said, some of those ACC schools that were 500 or whatever that have some maybe premier players, sprinkle in a couple of smaller schools and say the winning team gets to split that amongst the players. I I'm in. Do it. I think that would produce a much better postseason experience than what the NIT gives us. Because I bet 90% of the people watching this podcast, when the first weekend of the tournament goes on, and I asked you, we teleported into their living rooms and said, "Hey, what channel is the NIT on?" I don't think they could answer it. I think that they would have, they'd have to go Google it, or they'd have to just click around on the guide or whatever. It's not appointment television. It's just not anything that does us any good. And I
No,
know.
it's like taking professional basketball. Would you rather watch an NBA game or would you rather watch a G League game? I mean, it's the fact of the matter. It's the teams that didn't quite get it done. They weren't good enough throughout the course of the year. And sorry to be a rain on your parade, but yeah, the games are on ESPN. ESPN dubs themselves the home of college basketball, which they do a really good job up until the postseason because ESPN doesn't own the rights to the NCAA tournament. It's Turner and CBS that share it.
You're saying the NIT games are on ESPN?
Yeah.
Oh, then I extra guarantee you that nobody would be able to figure them out, because everyone would think that they're on some channel because all the NCAA tournaments are. It would be like one of those, like, it's staring you in the face and you're just, yeah, we will poll our viewers. I don't know how we'll do it. Maybe our boss can give me just like a list of email addresses and I'll just start cold calling people. But yeah, to tie this all the way back to Stu, let's never get to a scenario where the WCC has to just start inventing other tournaments. Let's maintain a good degree of representation, because there's always good basketball being played. So anything else on Stu before we move on?
No, I mean, I think, his experience in the NBA as a general manager, as working in the league office of understanding collective bargaining agreements in those roles definitely will help him in navigating this new college landscape where players can get paid, understanding of what the true differences were and how they are very similar or they need to be treated as similar moving forward.
While we are on the topic of the NCAA tournament, it's a great transition into your episode that you had with Coach Mark Few. Lot to talk about. He actually talked to you and opened up to you. He does not do a ton of media during the regular season, so I always love seeing him get to sit down for anything, but the conversation you with is absolutely awesome. On the topic, though, of the NCAA tournament, he got asked about expanding it and just his thoughts on the field, and he said, I want to get this quote right. It's the greatest sporting event out there, was his thoughts. And he likes it as is. He wants to leave it as is. I agree with him that it is the greatest singular in totality sporting event. Like, I'm not saying one, like just the national championship. The whole thing is perfection of sports. It is, it's sports cocaine that I like to inject straight into my veins every March. Your thoughts on your interview with him, what he said specifically about the NCAA tournament. There's a lot more to get to past that, though.
Yeah, no, it was great to have Coach Few sat down for, I think we were recorded for a good 40 minutes, which, he said, hey, I'll give you 20, and I stretched it to 40. I mean, it's one of those things where as a head coach at a program like Gonzaga, you're always getting asked and pulled to get to do media. I think one of the reasons, honestly, he's, besides loving Spokane, loving Gonzaga, feeling you can win a national title at Gonzaga, that he hasn't left, is you go to a lot of these other higher profile programs across the country. You have media responsibilities that you're not going to be able to get out of, that are told to you by your athletic director, that's told by your marketing departments. Coach Hughes never had to do that. So, for him to come on and spend a good 40 minutes and talk about a number of topics that are of relevance to the current college game, to Gonzaga's program being built up, to certain players that have come through, was absolutely awesome. You could tell his love for the NCAA tournament in being how it is and staying how it is. I would take it one step further and say, take the first four out. Take those four games out in Dayton, get rid of them, and move it back down to 64 teams. And guess what? Get rid of power conference teams that really didn't produce throughout the bulk of the season, to allow those teams that have to go to Dayton in the first four the ability to have a true NCAA tournament experience. I mean, you'll have 16 seeds playing 16 seeds. That I mean, they worked their butt off throughout the year, and then they won their conference tournament title. And now you got to go play in Dayton, which doesn't necessarily feel like the NCAA tournament. It's like done so quickly. Like if you play on the Tuesday if you play on the Tuesday, you're getting on a flight probably Sunday night right after selection committee. So your staff has hardly any time to prepare. Your players don't really have time to really enjoy the atmosphere that they're being thrust into. So I would say shift it back to 64. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but I wish it would. And then in regards to, he had some great thoughts, great comments on Chet Holmgren. He had some great thoughts on his being included with USA Basketball and his friendship with Steve Kerr and how they view the game is very much in line. And so overall it was great to have him in for a long sit down.
Our apologies to the city of Dayton. Dan did not mean any of it personally. We will issue a public.
I've never been there. I mean, I've heard it's a nice arena.
It
I've
just felt
called
like an
games for
unnecessary.
Dayton, but they've always been on the road, right? I've called games for Dayton, but they've always been on the road. I think I've had them at St. Louis. I think I've had them at UNLV. One other time on the road. Can't remember where, but I get it. It's close to Indianapolis, the home of the NCAA tournament. It's supposed to be a fairly easy city to get to. I guess another bone I would have to pick is the fact that, Boise State's had to go there twice. Boise to Dayton is not easy. If you're going to do a first four, those teams should all be within drivable distance. I mean, a 45-minute flight or a 5-hour drive, if you're going to really kind of, put these teams at a disadvantage.
Or just hit shuffle and like just have a random school generator pick where you guys are going to play the game.
No, that would be interesting. Like just shuffle it. Whoever has to play in Dayton. Oh shoot, you got your 1 seed at some point. Duke, sorry, you got to go to Dayton as a 1 seed. Maybe they play that 1/16 game in Dayton, but then you get a bye on that Thursday. That would be interesting if by chance they kind of hit the shuffle deck as you mentioned.
Everybody can go watch the episode and hear the actual words that coach said. And I'm just curious though, your maybe outside of the lines, like your impression that you might have gotten about how coach feels headed into this off season and into next season, just from some of the stuff you picked up from maybe what you said off camera or just maybe his general demeanor from everything you guys talked about.
He's excited for the season, and rightfully so. I think the thing he's most excited about or proud about is the fact that they have 7 of their top 8 returning scorers back from last year. Guys could have put their name in the portal, could have gone searching for money, could have gone, in a lot of different directions. But all those guys decided to come back, trust the process, trust the growth of their individual games, trust the vision and what's going to happen this year in picking up guys in the portal that will complement not only their games, but the team's game to give them what they all hope is ultimate success, getting to a Final Four, getting to a national title game and winning it. I think this roster, as it's starting to shape up, has enough talent and experience, versatility, depth. I think you can start talking at its Final Four caliber already because the guys that are returning, but then also the guys that are coming back the guys that are joining the mix now. Cliff Battle is proven to be a big time scorer. Innocenti, I believe that's how you pronounce it. We'll get it straight and correct in the near future. It shows a ton of promise as a defender. I think Braden Smith deciding to come as a Patriot League Player of the Year and come as a redshirt and kind of blur the line of what the next season's team is going to be shows you there's a true vision to the program and shows that there's a true vision to a lot of these players and how they're going to get better. I don't think I'm missing anybody that they've added in the portal. And then there's rumors that they've got their eyes on a couple other guys. One of them is a 7-foot rim protector. I haven't heard any more definitive answers one way or the other is in regards to if he's committed or how serious it is. But, that popped up on everybody's timeline last week. So, this team's got everything you need except maybe that rim protector shot blocker, which every team wants to have. But at the same time, you got to look at how Coach Few's always structured his teams. He's not going to pull away any of their offensive firepower or offensive juice or versatility just to put a rim protector in the middle. Because offense is how he views the game, sees the game, has had success with his teams. So, you got to find a rim protector that's not going to, be a detriment on the offensive end of the floor.
You're probably talking about a nuanced battle that every recruiting director has ever had to fight in terms of how do you balance offense versus defense in that one position. But so you're saying the overall takeaway from everybody after they go listen to the interview, which, as I said, great stuff in general coming out of that studio. But your takeaway is that Coach is extra excited, not extra excited, but Coach is really happy, confident, excited, whatever the word is that you want to use about this offseason going into next season. Yes?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be. I mean, he always kind of plays it cool, especially in the offseason. He tries to limit expectations, in the offseason, limit them in the preseason, which, you're starting to see Gonzaga ranked as a top 5 in some of these way too early polls. He's never fell into that trap. He's always been, how do we get better in this next short stretch, whether it's a 1 week stretch of, preseason prep for your first game, or whether it's a one practice stretch, how we get better from drill to drill or concept to concept that particular day. So you're not going to get him, overly excited and talking about, hey, the goal is the Final Four, am I right? That's not it. His goal is always going to be, we're going to go out there and compete. We're going to win. But I do feel good with what I've got bringing to the table in a 5-on-5 game every single night.
Yeah, and that's why we exist.
For
Is
sure.
the kernels of nuggets that Coach gives us as, yes, he'll say, I am happy and I am confident about this team. And that turns into, we can hop on here and go, Coach Few's guaranteeing Final Four. That's why the media exists, is to take that little bits that he does give us and extrapolate it out wildly into just unreasonable expectations for the team. Because like you said, even though we're 9 or 10 months out, the season is already looking like it's going to be another good one for Gonzaga. Any episodes coming up? Or any guests coming in, anything like that? Do you want the people to know about, or anything that we missed this week before we say goodbye?
Well, we still got a number of episodes we haven't released in their entirety yet. Former athletic director Mike Roth, we haven't released yet. Former baseball coach, Zag legend Steve Hertz. I don't believe our JP Batista episode is released in its entirety. I think we've only released a couple short clips of it. And then RJ Barsh, assistant coach, is coming in later today to record an episode, and we'll get that out there when the time's right. Zach Norvell was going to join today. I know he's been one of our most recommended guests. He had some travel delays and wasn't able to get back in town in time to join us this morning, but we should be recording with him in the near future, as well as Eric McClellan before he heads off to the East Coast. If you didn't know, Eric McClellan, former Zag, will be a grad assistant coach at Florida Atlantic down in the Miami area. So he'll be at FAU. Former Gonzaga director of ops, John Jacobs, now the head coach there, is decided to bring on Eric McClellan. So before he moves back to Florida, he's hoping to join us one last time as well.
Love that. Dan, thank you very much as always for joining us. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week.